The morning sun filtered through the tall windows of Salvatore's, casting long shadows across the polished hardwood floors. Catherine Morrison had been working at the upscale Italian restaurant for 8 months now, long enough to know the rhythm of the place, the unspoken hierarchies, the careful dance between front-of-house elegance and kitchen chaos. At 51, she'd learned not to ask too many questions about the expensive cars that sometimes idled outside, or the men in tailored suits who spoke in hushed tones in the private dining room. She needed this job. The tips were good enough to cover her modest apartment and the medications her elderly mother required. After her divorce 3 years ago and the collapse of the catering business she'd built over 2 decades, Catherine had learned to be grateful for steady employment, even if it meant setting aside her culinary school dreams and years of professional cooking to serve other people's creations. Catherine, Marco, the floor manager, appeared at her elbow, his usually confident demeanor replaced by something close to anxiety. The owner is here, with his son. Catherine felt her stomach tighten. In 8 months, she'd never seen Salvatore Marchetti, the man whose name hung above the door in elegant gold script. The staff whispered about him. Not just a restaurateur, but something more complicated, more dangerous. The kind of man who commanded respect through more than just wealth. His son is ill, Marco continued, lowering his voice. They've been trying to get the boy to eat for nearly a week. Nothing's working. Giovanni has prepared a dozen different dishes this morning, and the child has refused them all. Catherine glanced toward the kitchen, where the normally voluble head chef stood silent, his face flushed with frustration, and what might have been fear. "Why are you telling me this?" Catherine asked, though she suspected she already knew. Marco's eyes met hers. "You went to culinary school. You ran your own catering company for years before. Before. Giovanni is at his wit's end, and Mr. Marchetti is losing patience. I know it's not your job, but you want me to try cooking something for the boy. I'm asking if you would be willing to try." Catherine thought about her mother's medications, about the rent due in 2 weeks, about the precarious nature of employment at her age. But she also thought about the challenge in Marco's eyes, and the part of her that had never quite stopped being a chef, despite everything. How old is the child? 8, maybe 9. Small for his age. Marco checked his watch. And we have perhaps 20 minutes before Mr. Marchetti's patience expires entirely. In the kitchen, Catherine moved with the muscle memory of her professional years. She surveyed the chaos. Elaborate sauces congealing on plates, perfectly seared proteins cooling on cutting boards. The evidence of Giovanni's increasingly desperate attempts to satisfy an impossible critic. "What has he tried?" Catherine asked the chef. Giovanni threw up his hands. "Everything. Pasta carbonara, risotto Milanese, even brought in fresh Mediterranean seafood this morning. The boy won't even look at the food." Catherine closed her eyes briefly, remembering her own son at that age, during the difficult year after her separation from his father. Daniel had stopped eating then too, his small body's rebellion against a world that had suddenly become incomprehensible and frightening. "Let me try something simple," Catherine said quietly. She worked quickly, her hands remembering rhythms she hadn't used professionally in years. Pasta with butter and a delicate cream sauce, light enough for a sick child's stomach, but flavored with herbs that might open an appetite. On the side, she arranged fresh mozzarella cut into star shapes, a trick her Italian grandmother had used decades ago, transforming ordinary cheese into something that made a child smile. Giovanni watched with poorly concealed skepticism. This? This is what you're sending to Salvatore Marchetti after he's rejected my best work?" Catherine felt doubt creeping in. What was she thinking? She was a divorced waitress pushing 52, not some miracle worker, but she'd committed now. "It's what my grandmother used to make," she said simply. Sometimes simple is what a frightened child needs. Marco took the plate with visible reluctance. Catherine waited, her heart pounding with the intensity that seemed disproportionate to the situation. Through the kitchen doors, she could hear the absolute silence of a restaurant holding its collective breath. Then Marco reappeared, his expression unreadable. He ate it, all of it. His voice dropped to a whisper. "And now, Mr. Marchetti wants to see you." The private dining room was dimly lit, elegant in a way that spoke of old money and older power. The man seated at the head of the mahogany table was perhaps 55, with silver threading through dark hair and eyes that assessed her with disconcerting intensity. His suit was impeccably tailored, the kind of clothing that cost more than Catherine made in several months. Everything about him radiated controlled power, the set of his shoulders, the way he held himself absolutely still, the weight of his attention. Beside him sat a small boy with the same dark eyes, his pale face showing the first hint of color she suspected it had held in days. An empty plate sat before him. "You made this?" Salvatore Marchetti's voice was deep, accented, each word precisely chosen. Catherine nodded, not trusting herself to speak. "My son has been ill for 6 days. He has refused everything. The best chefs, the finest ingredients, dishes that cost more to prepare than most people earn in a week." His hand rested protectively on the boy's shoulder. "You are a waitress here?" "I am now, yes. Before—" Catherine hesitated, then continued with quiet dignity. "Before, I was a chef. I ran my own catering company for 18 years. And now you serve tables." It wasn't quite a question. "Life doesn't always follow the path we plan, Mr. Marchetti. Sometimes we make compromises to take care of the people we love." Something shifted in his expression. Recognition, perhaps, or respect. "You have children?" "A son. He's 26 now, living in Seattle. But I remember when he was your son's age." She looked at the boy gently. "Sometimes when we're scared or sad or sick, we don't want complicated things. We want comfort. Simple things that remind us of being safe." The boy, Matteo, she would learn later, watched her with those enormous dark eyes. "My grandmother was from Naples," Catherine continued. "When I was small, and the world felt frightening, she would make me pasta like this. Nothing fancy, just something gentle and familiar." Salvatore studied her for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice had lost some of its edge. "Would you be willing to prepare meals for my son? Not here at the restaurant. At my home. He clearly responds to your cooking in a way he hasn't responded to anyone else's." Catherine felt the ground shift beneath her feet. This was far outside normal employment arrangements, but she thought about her mother's medications, about the rent, about the desperate feeling of being 51 with few options and fewer prospects. "I would need to continue some shifts here," she said carefully. "I have responsibilities. My mother requires care, but I could prepare meals, bring them to your home perhaps, or cook in your kitchen if you prefer. You would come to the house, daily, prepare meals as needed, ensure my son eats." Salvatore's tone suggested this was not negotiable. "You'll be compensated generously. More than you make here, certainly." Marco, hovering at the edge of the room, nodded vigorously at Catherine. "May I ask what happened to your son? Why he stopped eating?" Salvatore's expression shuddered slightly. "His mother left us 6 months ago. The adjustment has been difficult. And then he became ill 2 weeks ago. Nothing serious, the doctors assure me, but enough to upset his system. Since then, he refuses food. I've tried everything." Catherine looked at Matteo, seeing in his small face the same lost expression her own son had worn during those difficult months of transition. "I'll help if I can, Mr. Marchetti, but I can't promise miracles. Sometimes healing takes time. Time I can give him, but I need someone who understands how to feed a frightened child." Salvatore stood, his considerable height even more imposing at close range. "Can you start tomorrow?" The Marchetti estate was nothing like Catherine had imagined. Yes, it was large and luxurious, but it wasn't ostentatious. The kitchen was a chef's dream, professional equipment, quality tools, a pantry that would make any culinary professional weep with joy. But what struck Catherine most was how empty it felt, how much it seemed like a house rather than a home. She met Rosa, the elderly housekeeper who'd been with the family for decades, and Maria, the nanny who admitted with relieved honesty that Matteo had been rejecting her care since his mother's departure. "He's angry," Maria confided, "at the world, at his father, at himself, for not being enough to make his mother stay. He won't talk about it, just closes up tighter and tighter." Catherine had spent enough years as a mother to recognize trauma when she saw it. She approached Matteo slowly over those first days, making simple foods, leaving them where he could access them without pressure, talking to him about anything except food or eating. She told him about her grandmother's kitchen in Boston, about learning to make pasta by hand when she was younger than he was now, about her own son and the year he stopped talking to her because the world hurt too much. "Did he start talking again?" Matteo asked one afternoon, his first voluntary words to her. "Eventually, when he was ready, when he'd had enough time to feel all the big, scary feelings." Catherine shaped dough for gnocchi, her hands moving with practiced ease. "Sometimes we need space to be sad or angry before we can be okay again. Papa doesn't understand," Matteo said quietly. "He thinks I should just be better. He tries so hard, but he doesn't get it. Parents often don't. We love our children so much that their pain becomes our pain. And when we can't fix it, we feel like we're failing. Catherine glanced at the boy. But your father loves you very much. I can see that. Over the following weeks, Matteo began to eat more consistently. Small portions at first, then gradually increasing. He started talking, not just to Catherine, but to his father, to Rosa, even occasionally to Maria. The color returned to his face, and with it, glimpses of the bright, curious child he'd been before grief had hollowed him out. Catherine found herself settling into the rhythm of the household. She arrived each morning, prepared meals, spent time with Matteo, and gradually became less of an employee and more of a presence. Rosa taught her family recipes. Maria shared stories about Matteo's early years, and Salvatore was complicated. He was undeniably what the rumors suggested, a man with power that extended far beyond legitimate business, connections that made even the police deferential, a reputation that preceded him into every room. Catherine wasn't naive enough to pretend otherwise, but he was also a father who read to his son every night, who'd memorized the names of every teacher and classmate, who sat in Matteo's room during nightmares and held him until the fear passed. A man who asked Catherine's opinion about his son's well-being with genuine humility, who listened when she suggested patience over pressure. "You've done something no one else could," Salvatore told her one evening, after Matteo had finally eaten a full meal. They stood in the kitchen while Catherine cleaned up, the intimacy of the domestic task making conversation easier somehow. "You've brought him back. Children are resilient when given the right support," Catherine said. "He just needed time and understanding. You provided both." Salvatore leaned against the counter, studying her in that disconcertingly direct way he had. "Why did you close your catering business, Catherine? You clearly have talent." She was quiet for a moment, deciding how much to share. "My husband left me for a younger woman 3 years ago. The business was in both our names, legally complicated. By the time the divorce was finalized, I'd lost most of my client base and all of my working capital. Starting over at 48 felt impossible, so I took what work I could find. That must have been difficult. It was devastating." Catherine met his eyes. "I'd built that business over 20 years. It was my identity, my passion, my livelihood. Losing it all at once, losing my marriage, my business, my sense of who I was. I'm still not entirely sure who Catherine Morrison is anymore. I see a woman who adapted when life became impossible, who set aside pride to take care of her family, who brought light back into a child's life when everyone else had failed." Salvatore moved closer. "Those seem like rather clear indications of character to me." Catherine felt heat rising to her cheeks. It had been years since a man had looked at her the way Salvatore was looking at her now, with attention that had nothing to do with professional courtesy and everything to do with genuine interest. "Mr. Marchetti, Salvatore, please. Salvatore, I should be clear about something. I'm here for Matteo, to help him heal and eat and find his way back to himself. I'm grateful for the employment and the generous compensation, but I need this to remain professional." "Professional," Salvatore repeated, something that might have been amusement flickering across his face. "Catherine, you've become part of our household. You're the first person besides Rosa that Matteo has truly connected with since his mother left. You've made my home feel like a home again rather than just an expensive prison. I don't think professional is an adequate description of what you've become to us. Then what am I?" The question came out more vulnerable than Catherine intended. "Essential," Salvatore said simply. "You're essential." The shift happened gradually, almost imperceptibly. Catherine found herself staying later in the evenings, sharing meals with Salvatore and Matteo, rather than leaving immediately after dinner prep. She began keeping spare clothes at the house for the occasions when cooking or playing with Matteo left her disheveled. She learned the rhythms of Salvatore's complicated business, the late-night phone calls, the men in expensive suits who arrived for meetings, the careful choreography of power and loyalty that defined his world. She also learned about the man beneath the reputation. Salvatore had built his empire from nothing, inheriting not wealth, but connections and expectations from a father who'd been part of the old neighborhood structures. He'd made choices, Catherine didn't ask for details, and he didn't volunteer them, that had secured his position, but cost him parts of his humanity he mourned in quiet moments. "When Matteo was born," Salvatore told her one evening, as they sat in the garden while the boy played nearby, "I promised myself he would have options I never had. Education, opportunities, the freedom to choose a different path." "And his mother?" Catherine asked gently. Salvatore's expression darkened. Carla wanted the lifestyle my success provided, but not the reality of what that success required. When she realized that being Mrs. Marchetti meant living with bodyguards and security protocols, and the knowledge of what I do, she left. Took nothing except the divorce settlement and never looked back. That must have hurt Matteo terribly. It destroyed him. He worshipped his mother, and she walked away without explanation, without even trying to maintain contact. Salvatore's hands clenched. I would give him everything I own, Catherine. Everything. But I can't give him back the illusion of a normal family. Catherine reached out, covering his fisted hand with her own. Maybe not normal, but you can give him love, stability, and proof that not everyone leaves. That's worth more than you might realize. Salvatore turned his hand over, lacing their fingers together. The gesture felt significant, intimate in a way that had nothing to do with professional boundaries. Stay, he said quietly. Not just for Matteo, though God knows he needs you, but for me. Stay. Catherine felt her heart racing. This man, dangerous, complicated, powerful beyond her comprehension, was asking her to be part of his life, not just as an employee, but as something more. Salvatore, I'm 51 years old. I'm divorced. My best years are behind me, and I come with complications of my own. My mother's health is declining. I have a son who barely speaks to me because he blames me somehow for his father leaving. I'm not— You're not what? Salvatore interrupted. Not young enough? Not simple enough? Catherine, I'm 55. I've lived a life that most people couldn't imagine and wouldn't want to. I don't need young and simple. I need real. I need someone who understands that life is complicated and messy and doesn't always follow the plan. Someone who stays even when things are difficult. Your world is dangerous, yes. I won't lie to you about that, but you'd be protected. Always. And your mother. Any care she needs, any medications, any support, I can provide that. Not as payment or obligation, but because that's what family does. They take care of each other. Family. The word resonated through Catherine with unexpected power. She'd lost her family when her husband left. Her son had drifted away, building a life across the country that didn't include her except for obligatory phone calls. Her mother was slipping into dementia gradually, losing pieces of herself each day. And here was Salvatore Marchetti, a man whose reputation should terrify her, offering not just employment or romance, but belonging. I'm scared, Catherine admitted, of hoping for something that might not last, of trusting again after being abandoned, of entering a world I don't understand. I'm scared too, Salvatore said, pulling her closer, of needing someone again, of giving you power to hurt me and Matteo, of hoping you'll choose to stay when you understand what staying really means. He cupped her face in his hands. But Catherine, I haven't felt this alive, this present in my own life, since before Matteo was born. You've reminded me what it feels like to want something beyond power and security. You've made me remember that there are things worth risking everything for. When he kissed her, it was gentle and searching, the kiss of a man who'd forgotten tenderness, but was trying to relearn it. Catherine kissed back, allowing herself, perhaps for the first time in 3 years, to simply feel without calculating the risks or planning the consequences. Mama Catherine? Matteo's voice broke them apart. The boy stood a few feet away, his expression uncertain but hopeful. Are you staying? Really staying? Catherine looked at this child who'd stolen her heart, at his father who'd somehow done the same, at the garden and house and life that had become home without her quite realizing it. Yes, she said, the word both terrifying and liberating. I'm really staying. Matteo's face lit up with the first genuinely joyful expression Catherine had seen him wear. He ran to them, throwing his arms around both Catherine and his father, creating a tableau that felt less like an ending and more like a beginning. That evening, after Matteo was asleep, Salvatore took Catherine to his private study. I need you to understand something, he said seriously. My life isn't simple. There are risks, complications, things you'll see and know that can't be unknown. If you stay, you're choosing all of that along with whatever we build together. I understand. I'm not naive about who you are or what you do. Then you also need to understand this. Salvatore opened a safe and removed a thick envelope. Documents establishing a trust fund for your mother's care, medical coverage, nursing support, anything she needs for the rest of her life, separate from anything between us. If you stay 1 day or 50 years, this doesn't change. Catherine felt tears burning. Salvatore, that's too much. It's nothing compared to what you've given us. You brought my son back from a place I couldn't reach him. You made this house feel like a home. You reminded me that I'm more than the sum of my choices and compromises." He pulled her close. "You showed me that it's not too late to build something real, even for someone like me. Even for someone like us," Catherine corrected, allowing herself to lean into his strength. Two people who thought they were finished with hope and new beginnings. They stood together in the quiet study, two people scarred by different battles but finding unexpected shelter in each other. Outside, the autumn evening was cooling into night. Inside, something new was taking shape. A family cobbled together from broken pieces, held together not by convention or expectation, but by choice. Catherine had entered Salvatore Marchetti's life to feed his son, but in doing so, she'd fed something in herself she hadn't realized was starving, the need to be essential, to matter, to belong somewhere fully and completely. Later, as she sat in the bedroom that had gradually become hers, Catherine called her son for the first time in months. "Daniel, it's Mom. I know we haven't talked much lately, but I wanted to tell you something. I've met someone. It's complicated, and I know you'll have questions, but I'm happy. For the first time since your father left, I'm actually happy." Her son's voice was cautious. "That's good, Mom. You deserve that. I'm sorry I wasn't stronger after the divorce. I'm sorry I leaned on you too much, made you feel responsible for my well-being. That wasn't fair." "Mom, let me finish. I've spent 3 years feeling like my life was over at 48. But Daniel, I'm learning that sometimes life doesn't end when we think it does. Sometimes it just changes shape. And maybe, if we're brave enough, we get to choose new beginnings, even when we thought all our chances were used up." There was silence on the line. Then, "Tell me about him?" Catherine smiled, looking around the elegant bedroom that had become home. "His name is Salvatore. He's complicated and a little dangerous and absolutely devoted to his son. And somehow, against all logic and reason, he sees me, really sees me. Not the divorcee or the failed business owner or the woman past her prime. Just me. Then I'm happy for you, Mom. Really." After they hung up, Catherine stood at the window overlooking the garden, watching Salvatore and Matteo play in the fading light. This life she'd stumbled into, caring for a traumatized child, falling for a dangerous man, building a family from unconventional materials. It shouldn't work. By all reasonable standards, she should be terrified and backing away. But Catherine was 51 years old and had learned that reasonable standards rarely accounted for the messy, complicated reality of how people actually survived and healed and found each other. She'd learned that sometimes the best things in life came from the most unlikely circumstances, that second chances appeared in unexpected forms, that it was never too late to choose hope over caution, connection over safety, love over loneliness. She'd come to feed a child who wouldn't eat. She'd stayed because she'd found a place where she was essential. And in the process, she'd discovered that even at 51, with all her failures and disappointments and scars, she was still capable of building something beautiful.